Okay, so we are live to our second Facebook post. The first one was kind of in the moment and very forward-looking. This one, we're going to take a step back and look at a place that was very important in Dylan's development. If I could zoom out. There we go. So today we're going to look at, we're here at Andrus, which is part of your past. And how old were you when you were here?
I was here from 11 years old to 15 years old.
And when was the last time you were here?
I must have been about 19. Yeah.
And what were some of the circumstances that led to your being here at the age of 11?
I was diagnosed with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, post-traumatic stress, selective mutism, and anxiety.
And can you say a little bit more about where the post-traumatic stress came from?
Yeah, I had issues growing up with my brother, who's severely autistic and intellectually disabled.
And so being here again now today, do you remember how you felt when you first came here?
Yes, I felt a sense of relief. It was the first place in my life that was actually open to me. I felt a sense of community, a sense of friends. I felt at home. I felt welcome. I felt excited.
Because the place you had come from before here was a little less compassionate, right?
Yeah, the public school I was in before this place wanted me to fail. Yeah.
And you were subjected to lots of intolerance.
Yes.
Can you go into that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I was non-speaking. When I was there, I had a lot of issues. I didn't do any work in school. I was considered to be a student with a bad attitude. I was a student with a bad attitude. A lot of people had trouble working with me because of my selective mutism. They didn't know what to do with me really in public school. There was a lot of issues.
And so tell me some of the significant things that you learned about yourself while you were here.
I learned that my voice matters. I learned that there was hope for me, that there was a future for me, that there was a community for me. I learned how to take care of myself a little better than I had done. I learned how to regulate my emotions a little better. I learned a series of coping skills that I have used to this very day.
Yeah, you can keep talking. I just wanted to pause here for a second.
I see. I learned I learned how to overcome obstacles. I learned how to be resourceful. I learned how to be resilient.
You had mentioned that this is where you were when you started to grow your hair longer?
Yes. When I first got here, I had a shaved head, a crew cut, and every 2 weeks or so, they had a barber come to cut everyone's hair. I started refusing. It was inevitable that my hair was going to grow, and so I ended up growing out my hair at that point.
When you say it was inevitable, why do you say that?
Just because if you don't cut hair, it'll just keep on growing. So, physically inevitable, I mean.
I was wondering if you, even at that early stage, were aware of, even subconsciously, transitions that you're beginning to manifest now.
Yeah. At the time, probably my sense of what I now know to be gender dysphoria is not, it was, these things have a way of becoming more impactful as a person gets older. So at the time, yeah, I guess, subconsciously I was aware that, yes, girls have long hair, and I started growing my hair. It wasn't really until 2 years later I started to be, people might have assumed that I was a girl. I didn't actually get assumed to be a girl until I was 13, because hair only goes like a half an inch a month, an inch. So it really, people didn't notice my hair grow for 6 months. 6 months to a year. In fact, it wasn't until a year later where I started, where people even noticed that I was growing my hair. At first, no one noticed anything.
And at the time, you were able to sort of mask the hair growing also with your interest in rock and roll, right?
Yes and no. Not at first. So I started growing my hair when I was 11, but I didn't start playing guitar until a week before my 13th birthday. So that 2-year period, up until the summer of me being 12, was not. I wasn't able to mask it at all. I never wanted to get rid of it, but it wasn't masked by anything in particular. It was just like, I happened to have long hair at the time. I was confused by it, though. I remember that. You know, so I started thinking of ideas like, what if I did have like a girl's hair style in it on a given morning or something. I asked, about the possibility of getting braids or something, things of that nature. My parents, I was told no, but it wasn't a serious no. So I ended up growing it out. It just got longer and longer.
But this is the place where you discovered music, or you were interested in music.
Yes. When I was 12 years old, a social worker played me Tommy. Yeah.
And how was that?
Life-changing. It gave me a reason to live. Gave me a reason, something that I wanted to pursue. And it gave me a reason to be me. And it showed me a way out.
And that also started to help you with your sort of coming out of your selective mutism at that time?
Yes. So one of the things with selective mutism, it's a very difficult thing to live with. So people, I think everyone's first question, someone who is selective, is always, when are you going to start talking, and what things can I do that would make you want to talk to me as a given person? The answer to that reality is that there really isn't. It's a very hard road to pursue. You can't force them to pursue it. Getting past it is very difficult. What I would suggest, however, it's good if they have a catalyst. I find that's very helpful in selective mutism particularly, is if they have a long-term reason to get past it. Like having a person who wants to talk to achieve a specific goal. But that person has to find that, whatever that reason is, for themselves. And in my case, it was music, because when I started playing guitar, I realized I wanted to be a musician, and I thought I might have to sing or something, so I had to start talking. So when I was 14, I started doing exposure therapy for selective mutism.
But then there was that whole issue at the time. You had identified, made a good sort of relationship with one of the staff, and then they fired her or something. And you have to establish a whole relationship again.
Okay, in this field, she wasn't fired. In this field, there is a lot of turnover. It's a very hard job. And sometimes in this field, there are things that happen, and oftentimes they don't necessarily have a administratively procedures in place, and sometimes people get caught in the middle of that and end up losing their jobs. It's a hard job. People left early on as there was a turnover, which I was not accustomed to. I had some trouble because to us as individuals who use this type of direct care, who use people in this capacity of staff, there were issues with this issue of turnover, and we formed very close bonds with our staff. We oftentimes protected our staff from getting in trouble. We stood by them. And when they left, it was very troubling to us. One time, so early on, I had trouble with staff leaving because they were the first people that I learned to trust. Growing up, I didn't always feel safe to trust people, so they taught me to trust them.
And so they're leaving, and having to establish that with a new person takes time.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it does. Yes, it can take time. In the case of selective mutism, when someone's selectively mute and they form a connection with someone, and that person leaves, it can be perceived as betrayal. So when people left early on, who I formed a close relationship with, I felt a certain extent of betrayal. Because I felt like I was giving that person a distinct honor of having a connection with me, which they were not entitled to. That's sort of how selective mutism works.
And then was that feeling that betrayal, did that produce feelings of anger, resentment, anxiety?
Anxiety, yes, but anger, no. These places are close-knit, we had a very close rapport with our staff. A lot of people did struggle with anger issues of various capacities, but I would say we always like to stand by our staff. And although we got angry at our staff sometimes, we also felt a certain sense of making up, and we were a family being in the residential together. The staff, us, we were there 24/7, so we knew more about the staff than they even necessarily were aware of. Yeah.
And you made some lifelong friends here too.
Yes.
You want to tell us about some of the folks that you met here that you're still friends with? Peers?
Yeah. So I have a friend. I have some friends that I met here. What do you want me to say about them exactly?
Well, this is the residence that you lived in back here?
No. The residence I lived in is all the way over there at the end.
On the other side? And
yeah.
This is what building are we in front of here?
That's McGee Hall. It is a residence. I mean, it's not a residence. It is McGee Hall is the place where there was a rec room. There's a gym. And it's sort of like a recreational building. And the music room is there as well.
Is that where you played guitar?
Yes, I spent a lot of time there. I had a lot of guitar lessons in that room.
And where did you meet Shmuel?
Shmuel? Oh, we met at the place up there, Andrus Hall. I met him in a reading room there. Every Friday they took us to a reading room. There would be people there reading books to us. One day they said a new kid showed up, and I remember that kid was showing up. He was challenged. It's always an adjustment, I think, for kids. Oftentimes when they enter residential, they've never been away from home before. If they have been away from home, it's usually oftentimes, for better or for worse, a lot of people come from hospitals, psychiatric hospitalizations, so we always like to be welcoming to the new residents that came in. In this case, I was particularly protective of this residence and really cared deeply emotionally for him because he was Jewish, and in the Jewish community growing up there, we always took care of our own. So, we talked when he was there. He first showed up. We really related. He was from Brooklyn. I'm from Queens, so we really had like a lot of common. I formed a very close friendship with him, which lasted to this very day. I learned a lot from him about compassion, authenticity, creativity, and about human diversity.
And in particular, he confided in you first when he realized that his life was changing.
I found it very powerful when he came out to me as gay. And
how did that happen? Can you talk about that story a little bit?
Yeah, so sometimes our class went to there's woods in the back, and they were going on a hike. For whatever reason, me and this other person stayed back, and the staff stayed back with us. That was with the science teacher at the time. And we were in the science room, the lights were off. There was one staff in the room just sitting in the background. And he's like, Dylan, I have to tell you something. And by this point, I was speaking. He's like, I have to tell you something. I'm like, okay, what do you have to tell me? He's like, I've been thinking. And he tells me a whole story related to relationships and things. And he's like, oh, by the way, I'm gay. And I said to him, I'm like, okay. That doesn't change what I think of you. I care very much about you. And I'm very happy that you came out to me. I hope this part of your life is rewarding to you. I completely accept you. I have no problem with that. And I really respected him for telling me. At the time, I didn't know who knew or who didn't. It was news to me.
Were you the first one he told?
I mean, coming out is a very interesting process. It's hard to pinpoint where it starts and where it ends.
And how was that for you? Did you, sort of play on any of that, rely or draw on any of that when you were coming to the realizations that you've been coming to recently, or in speaking to your parents, for example, about your desire to transition? Do you call back on any of this experience?
Yeah. There's this saying in gender and sexuality alliances, ally is gateway to out. Well, this experience of my friend coming out to me made me an instant ally to the LGBT community. So after that point, I started taking homophobia very seriously. And yeah, it certainly did. It propelled my interests going forward in LGBT issues.
And so, how is it being here now? Any thoughts or impressions?
It's rewarding to come back. It's a success. I'm a success story for the program, so it's a sense of pride. It's a sense of pride and acceptance. It's healing, rewarding. Brings back memories.
Tell me one that might be at the surface of your mind right now.
Well, we're standing in front of the tennis courts. That tennis court over there. After school, we always came there to play. A lot of the kids played basketball. I was never really that into sports, though. But a lot of my peers used to come and play basketball. This field over here is where a lot of the softball and football games were. I wasn't really into that very much. I remember this one time I was in the tennis courts, and I was just sitting there on a bench, sort of meandering around, wandering, pacing, snimming. And then in the distance, coming across the field, and there were a couple of other kids there. like 2 of them, you know, who were also there, and like 2 staff. Coming out of the woodwork, coming across the field, there was a new kid. This new kid was actually my upstairs neighbor and friend. And he showed up. As he was coming, I ran to him, which I think was quite jarring for the staff, because I tended to keep to myself. I didn't socialize that much, really. And I think as he was coming closer to me, his mother was there, the social worker, and him. And I was very happy to see him. I didn't talk at that moment, but I was generally happy to see him. Ecstatic, actually. He came in. I usually didn't play basketball. He came into the tennis courts, and I actually shot hoops with him. And that's what we did there. And then when I was in that other building, I had a day where I had sensory overload. And there was this big concert, and one of the staff came over to help me with that overload, and sat with me, and sat with me to help me with that overload. There was a trip I didn't want to go to, and the staff helped me deal with that sensory overload when I was upset. There was a trip I didn't want to go on, and I was crying in tears. I didn't know how to communicate at the time. She wasn't working with me at the time, and she wasn't working with me. And so, she came over and worked overtime to help me.
The place has a lot of memories, in other words.
Yeah.
In short. And how do you think that the overall quality of services ended up helping you on your way to independent living, which is ultimately the goal, right?
Yeah. When I first got here, I had very little ADL skills. I couldn't brush my teeth, take a shower, dress myself, and they were instrumental in helping me get me to do those things. Hair care, as my hair was growing, was also an issue. Yeah.
And any, suggestions looking back over it, things that in retrospect, in hindsight, being 2020 always, suggestions you would make to either, the staff of Andrus, or perhaps to the, developmental disability system in terms of working with, children the ages of, 11 to 15, like you were when you were here, that maybe there are gaps in the system or something that you would make recommendations about closing?
Yes, I would definitely. There's a lot of gaps in the system. We have a long way to go. The advocacy community, there's a lot of misinformation on these issues. I would say that we need to acknowledge that while there's nothing about us without us, that's what we say in disability rights, there's nothing about us without them, the staff who work there. So we need more acknowledgement of that. I don't think they get the praise that they deserve. So that's an issue. I would say that it's hard to be in one of these places. It can be traumatizing for a lot of people. A lot of things happen that people are not necessarily aware of, but I would say it's completely and utterly understanding that this is, these places, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today without it. And I think the beauty in coming back here is it's a symbol of how much I've grown, the person I've become, and the person who I'm becoming. Bob Dylan once talked about it in the sense of everyone's in the state of becoming. There's always room to grow, and I think places like this are just stepping stones on a journey. I think that that's an issue. I think to caretakers of people who are looking into these places as an option, it is good for them to know that these places exist, and while it could be hard to not have your child at home, which is understandable why that would be an issue, you also have to. We also need to recognize that this is a new beginning for your child and ultimately for your family as a whole. And I think that that issue is something that we need to acknowledge and greet it with open arms. I think that that is an issue to for kids who are possibly going into residential places, looking into that. I would say to them, definitely take the help that's allotted to you. It is what you make of it, and I would suggest you definitely be careful though. Watch your back. While it's true that technically you're watched 24/7, there's someone on duty. Staff don't see everything. So definitely watch your back. Watch your friends' back. You don't know who you're with. You could be with one person, could be your best friend 1 minute, and next minute you might see them dealing with their struggles, perhaps with aggression or things of that nature. So yeah, you need to understand that, you know, everyone's there for a reason. Also, watch your stuff and your belongings. Things have a tendency to get stolen. Some people do have issues with that. But if you're resourceful, you look out for yourself, you look out for your friend, you'll be okay. And definitely use the help around you. One of the things that I learned, it was as I communicated more what my needs were, the more I could get them met. No system is perfect. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And we do have a long way to go. We need to look into what medications do for children. What's the effect of psychiatric drugs on child development. We need to look at some of the administrative processes relating to integration, community, and overall administrations would be helpful if they ran better. No system is perfect. But I would say that this also is your opportunity to make friends, grow, and you might learn things about yourself that you may not have realized. So I would say definitely keep an open mind. I've made mistakes in that regard. Yeah. But it's important to realize that there's no do-overs in life. Yeah.
Well, great. Anything else you want to say before we leave here?
No. But I do think we should go down to the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think also we want to just tell our audience that we have something coming up in June, later on in June, right? That we're going to try to do for Pride Month.
Yeah.
It was very much in the planning, so let's stay tuned. Hopefully everybody will stay tuned for that.